Hello, everybody. For the record, I'm not wei3er. She didn't want to appear on camera, so here I am. If you ask me what Wonderland is, I will tell you it's the home for 70+ engineers who have a single passion, that is to solve the foundational problems of the frontier technologies we work on, and also have a common sense on what elegant solutions look like. But this talk isn't about Wonderland. This talk is a personal story about two coins I'm personally connected to, both free float. One is ruled by the government, the other one is decentralized. So this is the coin I was born into. This is not a meme coin. This is arguably a scam, but this is maybe the reason why me and so many Argentinians joined into crypto. I remember as a child, a McDonald's combo costing like 1 peso, and now you'd need to get more than 10,000 to pay one. The thing is, when you are born in a coin that consistently goes down, the most reasonable thing to do is to take debt, because you're going to pay lesser in the next few months. No matter what the interest rates look like, you pay with your credit card. The thing is, the only thing that you could trust in Argentina is that the government wouldn't let the lenders take profit. They would devaluate with time. And this is what you can see in this carry trade graph. The thing is, if you lended money to Argentina for the last 30 years, you'd probably have like 1/10 of what you started with. On 2019, on a primary election I didn't like, I decided to move abroad. And it wasn't until 2021 that I decided to join into crypto. Luckily for me, I didn't have any money to invest on ETH at that time. But it wasn't, I didn't know anything about finances. All I cared about, it was open source, self-sovereignty, and simple mechanisms, lack of dependencies, lack of intermediaries, what brought me in. So there was one coin I was mostly interested in, and it was a free-floating coin that started at 314, and it wasn't until 2022 that I had the opportunity to ask about. I went into ETH Latam in Buenos Aires, and there was a panel of experts about stablecoins, and there was a shy Q&A. I decided to raise my hand. I knew that person wasn't one of the founders or the creators, but I also knew this was like one of the only opportunities I would get from having an answer. So I raised my hand, I said like, hey, what about Rai? And after uncomfortable silence, they were like, okay, that's too complex for this talk, so you'll have to research it out. So I was devastated. It wasn't until a few months later that in one of our cycles, we invited people to experts to talk about what they want. And here came this curly guy, half naked, well, at least half, and he started talking about what happened in 1971, about Milton Friedman ideas, and how they managed to automate the monetary policy of this coin. He was one of the founders of Rai. So what the fuck happened in 1971? With the gold standard lost, the US government started printing dollars. And to my surprise, when I did this research, I learned that the US dollar didn't devaluate at all. And also the interest rates generated that if you lended to a US government, you could 4x what you lended in the next 10 years. Impressive. The thing is, when you index by the inflation, you could only break even. This is how rigged the game was. And what is a PID? How they managed to automate this monetary policy. A PID stands for Proportional, Integral, and Derivative Mechanism. It dates to the 1900s, and it's a simple mechanism to stabilize a measurement into their target. So if you want, let's say, for example, if you want to heat water up to 60 degrees, what you do is you measure the gap that you have and you start applying energy to the system depending on that gap. That's the proportional term. The thing with the proportional term is that it tends to overshoot and undershoot. It never stabilizes in the target. So in order to avoid overshooting, what we do is we take the derivative of this curve and we start applying a correction beforehand. So since we know we are reaching the target, we start reducing the energy that you are putting and we stabilize this mechanism without overshooting. The problem is that sometimes we stabilize the mechanism in a position that it's not our target. So this is where we include the integral term, that not only we measure the gap, how far we are from the target, we start measuring how long we've been this far. It wasn't until a few months later that I received a call that changed the way I saw finances for the next months. Matti called me and told me that we were partnering with Reflexer and that we were going to fork RAI into a multi-collateral protocol more open to experimentation that it's called HAI. I not only didn't need to understand the mechanism, I need to know like every single aspect of that. So HAI launched on February of 2023. Yeah, and initially the PID controller was completely off. There was no interest rate. There was no incentive to hold HAI. It was just people taking debt in HAI to be able to take leverage and people repaying that debt because it was a discount. So you deposit some ETH, you take 100 HAI, you sell it for 100 USD, and then suddenly you can rebuy all that debt for 90 USD. You rebuy your debt, repay it, withdraw the collateral, and are at profit. So it was like kind of a leverage shares game where one person taking leverage was giving a discount to the other one to ramp off, let's say. So a few months later, the PID controller, actually PI, because there was no derivative term, the PI controller was turned on. And even if the market price was below the official price, the redemption price started climbing and the market price followed it, depending on on what was the difference between the target and the actual price. The problem is that, as you can see, the P term of the calculation started overshooting and undershooting. So depending on which day or which hour you enter the app, you could see interest rates of up to 100% yearly or 5% the next hour. So 6 months later, what we did is we deprecated the P term of the controller and relied exclusively on the integral term. So you can see that the protocol stabilized the redemption rate, that is the interest rate that the coin had. And strangely, the market didn't reflect the interests. So people were buying like cheap HAI and being promised 5, 10%, 15, up to 20% rates. But for 6 months straight in their portfolio, they saw no increase at all. They bought HAI at 120, and 6 months later it was 120. People who took debt, they took debt at 120, they could repay the debt at 120 with no interest collected at all. And it all changed one weekend on December that the market offered to collect all of the interest all at once. The event was that one of these debt positions failed to fulfill the calculations of their debt, and the protocol confiscated their collateral and offered it to sale for HAI at redemption rate, and then you see the arbitrage, effectively burning 20% of the total supply in a matter of minutes, hours. What happened next is that since October, ETH has dropped 60% from its peak value, and suddenly it's more attractive to hold HAI than to hold ETH. So HAI debtors or high minters are rushing to repay their debts at a decent price. The thing is, the interesting part of this mechanism is that if holders that are the lenders of value decide to get greedy and charge for this debt a lot of money, the system will start turning the upside down and turning the redemption rate negative, effectively making the interest go down and making the lenders to subsidize the borrowers. So this is what avoids the greediness in the protocol. And this is what happens when you sustainably have a market price above the target price. So Milei came into office on December 2023, and the first thing he did was to censure the US dollar market price or official price. And he promised to cut a finger if he devaluated again. And interest rates started lowering, but even with lower interest rates, the Argentinian peso became one of the most interesting investments on that year. But this is exclusively because he kept that promise, and in crypto we don't trust, we verify. In comparison, Hase had lesser return rates, but still above the USD scam. And with no promises, with no intermediaries, no admin keys. The thing is, since I came into the space, I've seen dozens of protocols that they relied on trust, and then they ended up exploding under their own trust. You see, Luna had raised 20 billion and then exploded. Then USDC had a 13% depeg over one weekend. Noom Finance, they released a Argentinian stablecoin, and then they promised some interest rates similar to savings account, but then they were acquired and nobody heard from them at all. USR, I think last week, they had like 100 million in TVL, and then some admin key was leaked for a hack of 25. The thing is, when you have your mechanics at place, even 30 people depending the peg, it's money enough. So when people ask me about this protocol, they say like, oh, how it's high? I say like, hey, it's going okay. It has like 500,000 in TVL. It has perhaps 30 active users, and they are like, oh, I'm sorry about that. No, nothing to be sorry about. I'm glad. I'm proud. It's working as expected. This is perhaps some of the reasoning that got me liquidated once. Remember, if you are taking debt, chasing protocol rewards, and if you go over in a weekend without your computer, especially under this war, I will tell you to compound the rewards. The thing is, Hase is not for whales. If you happen to accumulate 100,000, then probably you're sitting under a huge impermanent loss if you want to suddenly pull off. But here's what I want to leave you with, and it's a question. What do you think it should happen if this whale starting DCAing its way out? If you consistently have a 5 or 10% for a few months lesser than what you thought it was. And this is the same for a lender that is ramping off, or for a new borrower that is taking a new leverage. Because if you understand that, if you know what happens with funding rates when a lot of people short or long BTC at the same time, if you realize that we can collateralize anything, RWAs, LPs, meme coins, if you acknowledge that we can peg to any variable, to USD, inflation index, Indian rupees, if you recognize that we managed to automatize a monetary policy with no intermediaries, no admin keys, almost no fine-tuning at all, then I I achieved what I went to see, what I went to look for in ETH Latam, and I didn't find. I successfully made you all get high. Thank you very much. And if you happen to be the smartest brain on the room and you're bored of that, I recommend changing room and joining Wonderland.